Welcome to all our viewers around the world. Before we dive into today's fascinating journey through time, I'm curious, what time is it where you're watching? Are you settling in with your morning coffee, taking a lunch break? Or perhaps it's late evening where you are? And which country are you joining us from today? Whether you're watching from bustling New York, quiet countryside in England, the vibrant streets of Tokyo, or anywhere else on this beautiful planet, you're about to discover something that will completely change how you think about fast food. Forever. Picture this. It's a scorching hot afternoon in Rome, around 150 AD. The sun beats down mercilessly on cobblestone streets, packed with people. A construction worker wipes sweat from his brow, his stomach growling audibly. He's been hauling stone blocks since dawn, and he's absolutely starving. But here's the thing, he can't just pop into his apartment to grab a sandwich from the fridge. Why? Because he doesn't have a kitchen. In fact, most Romans living in the cramped apartment buildings called insulae had no cooking facilities whatsoever. So what does he do? He follows his nose to the nearest thermopolium, essentially ancient Rome's version of a fast food joint, where the air is thick with the aroma of simmering stews, roasted meats, and fresh bread. This isn't just any story about food. This is the untold tale of how an entire civilization survived on what we might recognize today as the world's first junk food empire. For over 1,000 years, Romans were grabbing quick bites, street snacks, and fast meals in ways that would make modern fast food chains look like amateurs. They had drive-thrus before cars existed, food trucks before trucks were invented, and delivery systems that put today's apps to shame. But here's what will absolutely blow your mind. The Romans didn't just invent fast food, they perfected it, regulated it, taxed it, and turned it into a cornerstone of their society. They created a food culture so sophisticated and so influential that traces of it still exist in every pizza slice you eat, every sandwich you grab, and every street vendor you pass by today. The story begins in the narrow, winding streets of ancient Rome, with the smell of garum, a fermented fish sauce that was basically the ketchup of its day, mixed with wood smoke and human sweat to create an olfactory experience that would assault modern senses, but felt like home to millions of Romans. These streets weren't just pathways between buildings, they were rivers of commerce, social interaction, and most importantly, food. Most people today imagine ancient Romans as sophisticated diners reclining on couches, feeding each other grapes, and discussing philosophy over elaborate banquets. And sure, if you were wealthy, that lifestyle existed. But for the vast majority of Rome's million-plus inhabitants, eating was a quick, practical affair that happened on the go, standing up, and often while conducting business or socializing. With friends, the insulae, where most Romans lived, were essentially ancient apartment complexes, sometimes reaching 6 or 7 stories high. These buildings were notorious fire hazards, partly because cooking inside them was either forbidden or extremely dangerous. The lower floors might have small braziers for heating, but actual cooking facilities were rare and risky. This wasn't an oversight in urban planning. It was intentional. Roman authorities knew that open flames in crowded wooden buildings were disasters waiting to happen. So where did people eat? They ate out. Every single day. 3 times a day, if they could. Avoid it. This created a food service industry that dwarfed anything we see in modern cities. On every street corner, in every plaza, along every major thoroughfare, food vendors set up shop to feed the hungry masses. The thermopolium was the crown jewel of Roman fast food. These establishments were essentially ancient diners, complete, with marble countertops that had large ceramic jars called dolia built right into them. These jars kept various foods hot and ready to serve: stews, porridges, wines, and other prepared dishes. The setup was brilliant in its simplicity. Customers could see exactly what was available, point to what they wanted, and be served immediately. But thermopolia weren't just about speed and convenience. They were social hubs where people gathered to eat, drink, gossip, conduct business, and catch up on the latest news. Imagine your favorite local diner or coffee shop, multiply the social importance by 10, and you're getting close to what these places meant to Roman society. The food served in Thermopolia was hearty, flavorful, and designed to satisfy working people who needed energy for physical labor. Popular dishes included lentil stew, thick with vegetables and sometimes meat, chickpea porridge that could be seasoned with various herbs and spices, barley soup that was filling and nutritious, and various meat dishes that were roasted, boiled, or fried, depending on what was available and affordable. One of the most popular items was something called pulmentum, which was essentially a thick porridge made from various grains and legumes. This might sound boring to modern ears, but Roman cooks had elevated this simple dish into an art form. They would add honey for sweetness, cheese for richness, nuts for texture, herbs for flavor, and sometimes even small pieces of meat or fish for protein. The result was a complete meal that was nutritious, filling, and delicious. Another staple was focaccia. Yes, the same focaccia you can buy at trendy bakeries today. Romans were eating this flat bread topped with olive oil, herbs, and sometimes cheese or olives more than 2,000 years ago. Street vendors would bake fresh focaccia throughout the day, and the smell would draw customers from blocks away. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Roman fast food was how it reflected the empire's incredible diversity. Rome wasn't just feeding Romans, it was feeding people from every corner of the known world. Germanic tribes, Egyptian merchants, Spanish soldiers, Greek philosophers, Jewish traders, and countless others all called Rome home, and they all brought their food traditions with them. Walk down any street in ancient Rome, and you'd encounter an incredible variety of cuisines. There were vendors selling Germanic sausages, Egyptian flatbreads, Greek honey cakes, Spanish olive preparations, and countless fusion dishes that combined elements from multiple cultures. This wasn't just multiculturalism, it was the world's first truly international food scene. The spice trade made this diversity possible. Roman merchants traveled to the far reaches of Asia to bring back black pepper, cinnamon, ginger, and other exotic spices that transformed simple ingredients into complex, flavorful dishes. A basic lentil stew could become an aromatic masterpiece with the right combination of imported spices. Garum deserves special mention because it was absolutely everywhere in Roman cuisine. This fermented fish sauce was made by layering fish entrails with salt in large containers and letting the mixture ferment in the sun for several months. The resulting liquid was strained and used as a condiment, cooking ingredient and flavor enhancer in countless dishes. Modern people often wrinkle their noses at the idea of garum, but it served the same function as soy sauce in Asian cuisine or Worcestershire sauce in English cooking. It added umami, that savory, meaty flavor that makes food more satisfying and delicious. Romans put garum on everything: vegetables, meat, bread, even desserts. It was their universal flavor enhancer, and no kitchen or street vendor was complete without several varieties. Speaking of street vendors, Rome had thousands of them. These weren't just people selling food, they were specialized craftsmen who had perfected specific dishes or preparation methods. There were bread vendors who specialized in different types of loaves, meat vendors who knew exactly how to roast different cuts, wine vendors who could recommend the perfect drink to accompany any meal, and dessert vendors who created sweet treats that would make modern pastry chefs jealous. One type of vendor that particularly fascinated Romans was the libarius, who sold spiced wine and other beverages. These weren't just drink sellers. They were ancient mixologists who could create complex flavor combinations using wine, honey, spices, and various additives. Popular drinks included mulsum, wine mixed with honey, conditum, spiced wine with various herbs and spices, and uenogarum, wine mixed with garum for those who wanted their drinks extra savory. The Roman approach to beverages was sophisticated in ways that might surprise modern drinkers. They understood that different wines paired better with different foods, that temperature affected flavor, and that adding certain ingredients could enhance both taste and health benefits. Wine wasn't just alcohol, it was medicine, nutrition, and social lubricant all rolled into one. But Romans didn't just drink wine. They had a variety of non-alcoholic beverages that were popular throughout the empire. Vodka was a drink made from vinegar and water that was particularly popular with soldiers and working people because it was refreshing, helped prevent scurvy, and was much safer than drinking plain water. Mulsa was made from honey and water and was considered both delicious and healthy. Water quality was a constant concern in ancient Rome, despite the city's famous aqueduct system. While the aqueducts brought fresh water from distant springs, that water could become contaminated during storage and distribution. Adding vinegar, wine or honey to water wasn't just about flavor, it was about food safety. This brings us to one of the most important aspects of Roman food culture: preservation and safety. Without refrigeration, Romans had to be incredibly creative about keeping food fresh and safe to eat. They developed techniques for smoking, salting, drying, and fermenting foods that allowed them to store provisions for months or even years. Cheese was one of the most important preserved foods in the Roman diet. Roman cheesemakers created varieties that could last for extended periods without spoiling, and cheese became a staple protein source for people who couldn't afford fresh meat regularly. Different regions of the empire became famous for specific types of cheese, and cheese merchants would travel hundreds of miles to bring the best varieties to Roman markets. Preserved meats were equally important. Romans perfected techniques for making sausages, cured hams, and other meat products that could survive long journeys and extended storage. These preserved meats weren't just practical, they were delicious, and they formed the basis for many popular street foods. One of the most popular street foods was a type of ancient sandwich made with preserved meat, cheese, and vegetables stuffed into a piece of flatbread. Sound familiar? This was essentially the ancestor of the modern sandwich, invented out of necessity by people who needed portable, nutritious meals they could eat while working or traveling. The concept of portable food was crucial in Roman society because so many people were constantly on the move. Merchants traveling between cities, soldiers marching to distant provinces, laborers walking to construction sites. All of these people needed food that could travel with them and provide sustained energy throughout the day. This need led to the development of what we might call the first energy bars. Romans created dense, nutritious cakes made from various grains, nuts, dried fruits, and honey that could provide sustained energy for hours. These weren't just survival food, they were carefully crafted to be both nutritious and delicious. Honey played a crucial role in Roman cuisine, serving not just as a sweetener, but as a preservative, medicine, and flavor enhancer. Roman beekeepers were highly skilled professionals who understood bee behavior, seasonal cycles, and how different flowers affected honey flavor. The best honey commanded high prices and was treasured like fine wine. Romans used honey in ways that might seem strange to modern palates. They made honey wine, mead, honey cakes, honey-preserved fruits, and even honey-cured meats. Honey was mixed with vinegar to create sweet and sour sauces, combined with spices to make complex condiments, and used as a base for various medicines. The medicinal use of food was deeply integrated into Roman culture. Romans didn't see food and medicine as separate categories. They understood that what you ate directly affected your health, energy, and longevity. This wasn't folk wisdom. It was based on centuries of observation and experience. Different foods were believed to have different effects on the body. Garlic was eaten to prevent illness and increase strength. Ginger was used to aid digestion and warm the body in cold weather. Various herbs were added to foods not just for flavor, but for their supposed health benefits. This holistic approach to food and health influenced how street vendors prepared and marketed their wares. A vendor might advertise that his lentil stew would give customers strength for heavy labor, or that his spiced wine would help with digestion after a large meal. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was preventive medicine. The social aspects of Roman street food were just as important as the nutritional ones. Eating was a communal activity that brought people together across social and economic lines. A wealthy merchant and a poor laborer might find themselves standing side by side at the same thermopolium, eating similar food and discussing the events of the day. This democratic aspect of street food was revolutionary for its time. In most ancient societies, what you ate was determined entirely by your social status. But in Roman street food culture, a well-prepared dish could be enjoyed by anyone who could afford it, regardless of their position in society. The economics of Roman street food were fascinating and complex. Vendors had to balance quality, quantity, and price in ways that would satisfy customers while still making a profit. They competed not just on taste, but on speed of service, portion size, and the social atmosphere of their establishments. Successful vendors became well-known figures in their neighborhoods. Customers would develop loyalty to particular establishments, and vendors would remember their regular customers' preferences. This personal touch made street food more than just a commercial transaction. It was part of the social fabric of Roman urban life. The supply chains that fed Roman street food were incredibly sophisticated for their time. Vendors needed reliable sources of fresh ingredients, preserved foods, spices, wines, and cooking fuel. This created networks of farmers, merchants, transporters, and suppliers that connected every corner of the empire to the streets of Rome. Grain was the foundation of this supply system. The Roman government understood that feeding the city's population was essential for maintaining social order, so they created elaborate systems for importing wheat from Egypt, North Africa, and other grain-producing regions. This grain wasn't just distributed as raw ingredients. Much of it was processed into bread, porridge, and other prepared foods by commercial bakers and cooks. The Roman bread industry was massive and highly regulated. There were different types of bread for different social classes, from coarse dark loaves for the poor to fine white bread for the wealthy. But street vendors served all kinds of people, so they offered bread in various qualities and price ranges. Panis quadratus was a particularly popular type of bread that was scored into 8 sections, making it easy to break apart and share. This practical design made it perfect for street food. Customers could buy just a section or two if they were eating alone, or purchase an entire loaf to share with friends or family. The variety of breads available in ancient Rome was staggering. There were breads made from different grains, breads with various additives like cheese or herbs, sweet breads with honey or fruit, and specialty breads for religious festivals or special occasions. Bakers competed fiercely to create new varieties that would attract customers and set their products apart from the competition. But bread was just the beginning. Roman street food included an incredible variety of prepared dishes that showcased the culinary skills of professional cooks. These weren't just people throwing together random ingredients. They were skilled craftsmen who had learned their trades through years of apprenticeship and practice. Roasted meats were particularly popular, and Roman cooks had perfected techniques for cooking different types of meat to perfection. They understood how to use marinades, rubs, and basting techniques to create flavors that would make the meat irresistible to passing customers. The smell of roasting meat was one of the most effective advertisements a vendor could have. Vegetables were prepared in countless ways to make them more appealing and nutritious. Romans knew how to pickle vegetables to preserve them and add tangy flavors, how to stuff vegetables with grains and spices to create complete meals, and how to combine different vegetables to create satisfying and colorful dishes. One particularly popular dish was stuffed dates. Vendors would remove the pits from fresh dates and stuff them with nuts, cheese, or spiced meat mixtures. These sweet and savory combinations were perfect snacks that provided quick energy and satisfied multiple taste preferences simultaneously. The Roman sweet tooth was legendary, and street vendors capitalized on this with an amazing variety of desserts and sweet treats. Honey cakes were popular, but so were fresh fruits, nuts coated in honey, sweet cheese preparations, and various fried doughs that were the ancestors of modern pastries. Libum was a particularly special sweet, a cheesecake-like dessert that was often prepared for religious offerings, but was also sold by street vendors for special occasions. Made with cheese, eggs, and honey, it was rich, satisfying, and considered both delicious and spiritually significant. Seasonal eating was an important aspect of Roman food culture. Vendors adjusted their offerings based on what was available and affordable at different times of year. Spring brought fresh vegetables and herbs, summer offered abundant fruits, autumn provided nuts and grains, and winter featured preserved foods and hearty stews. This seasonal approach wasn't just practical, it was part of Roman religious and cultural traditions. Different foods were associated with different gods and festivals, and eating seasonally was seen as being in harmony with the natural world and the divine order. The Roman calendar was packed with religious festivals, and each one had its associated foods and drinks. Street vendors would prepare special items for these occasions, creating temporary menus that reflected the religious significance of the day, while also capitalizing on increased foot traffic and celebratory spending. Saturnalia, the winter festival, that was the ancestor of Christmas, was particularly important for food vendors. During this week-long celebration, normal social rules were suspended, and people of all classes mingled freely. Street food played a crucial role in these festivities, providing the fuel for extended celebrations and the democratic eating experiences that characterized the holiday. The influence of Roman military culture on street food cannot be overstated. Roman soldiers were some of the most mobile people in the ancient world, and they needed portable, nutritious food that could sustain them during long marches and campaigns. This military need drove innovations in food preservation, preparation, and packaging that benefited civilian food culture as well. Hardtack, a type of long-lasting bread that could survive months of travel and storage, was perfected by Roman military quartermasters. But this practical food also became popular with civilians who needed cheap, durable food for long workdays or travel. Military rations influenced civilian tastes in other ways too. Soldiers returning from campaigns brought back preferences for foreign foods and preparation methods they had encountered in distant provinces. This cultural exchange enriched Roman cuisine and created demand for new types of street food. The Roman approach to food safety and regulation was surprisingly modern. In many ways, local authorities understood that contaminated food could cause disease outbreaks that would threaten public health and social order. They created laws governing food preparation, storage, and sale that protected both vendors and customers. Food inspectors would regularly visit markets and street vendors to check the quality of ingredients and the cleanliness of preparation. Vendors who sold spoiled or contaminated food faced heavy fines and could lose their licenses to operate. These regulations weren't just about preventing illness. They were about maintaining Rome's reputation as a sophisticated, well-ordered city. Foreign visitors and dignitaries needed to be impressed by the quality and safety of Roman food, and street vendors played a crucial role in creating these positive impressions. The taxation of food was a complex and politically sensitive issue. In ancient Rome, The government needed revenue, but they also understood that food prices directly affected social stability. Taxing food too heavily could lead to riots and civil unrest, but not taxing it at all would leave the government short of funds. Street food vendors were caught in the middle of these political considerations. They had to pay various taxes and fees for the right to operate, but they also had to keep their prices affordable for ordinary customers. This balancing act required considerable business skill and political awareness. The location of street food vendors was carefully regulated by Roman authorities. Prime spots near major intersections, public buildings, and popular gathering places commanded higher fees, but also offered access to more customers. The most successful vendors were those who could secure good locations and make the most of the foot traffic they generated. Competition among vendors was fierce, but generally friendly. Romans understood that having multiple food options in the same area actually benefited everyone by creating food districts that attracted more customers overall. Vendors would often specialize in different types of food or different price ranges. To avoid direct competition while still benefiting from proximity to each other, the training and apprenticeship systems that produced skilled food vendors were sophisticated and well established. Young people who wanted to enter the food business would typically apprentice with experienced vendors for several years, learning not just cooking techniques, but also business skills, customer service, and the complex regulations governing food sales. These apprenticeships created a professional culture that valued skill, innovation, and customer satisfaction. Successful vendors took pride in their craft and competed to create the most delicious, innovative, and popular dishes in their neighborhoods. The tools and equipment used by Roman street vendors were ingeniously designed for portability, efficiency, and durability. Portable stoves that could burn wood or charcoal, folding tables and counters, storage containers that protected food from contamination, and serving implements that could handle high volumes of customers. All of these were perfected by generations of vendors who needed equipment that worked reliably under challenging conditions. Water management was crucial for street vendors. They needed clean water for cooking and cleaning, but they also had to dispose of wastewater safely and legally. Roman cities had sophisticated sewage systems, but vendors still had to be careful about how they used and disposed of water to avoid creating health hazards or violating city regulations. The relationship between street vendors and their suppliers was built on trust, reliability, and mutual benefit. Vendors needed consistent sources of quality ingredients at fair prices, while suppliers needed customers who would pay promptly and order regularly. These relationships often lasted for decades and became an important part of the social and economic fabric of Roman neighborhoods. Credit and financing arrangements allowed vendors to start and expand their businesses even if they didn't have significant capital. Experienced vendors might lend money or equipment to promising newcomers, creating mentor relationships that strengthened the overall food vendor community. The role of women in Roman street food was significant but often overlooked by historical sources that focused primarily on male activities. Women worked as vendors, cooks, suppliers, and in many other capacities that kept the street food system functioning. Many of the most popular and successful food establishments were run by women who had developed loyal followings for their cooking skills and business acumen. Slavery, unfortunately, was also part of the Roman street food system. Some vendors were slaves who worked for wealthy owners, while others were freed slaves who had used their skills and savings to start their own businesses. The complex social dynamics of Roman slavery meant that some slave-operated food stalls were among the most successful and respected in their neighborhoods. The evening food scene in Rome was particularly vibrant and diverse. As the heat of the day subsided, Romans would emerge from their homes and workplaces to socialize, conduct business, and enjoy meals together. Street vendors would light oil lamps and torches to illuminate their stalls, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere that drew customers from across the neighborhood. Night markets were common in many parts of Rome, offering everything from quick snacks to elaborate meals. These evening gatherings were social events as much as commercial activities, with vendors, customers and passers-by mixing freely to create the kind of community atmosphere that made Roman urban life so appealing. The sounds of Roman street food were as distinctive as the smells. Vendors would call out their wares in rhythmic chants that could be heard blocks away. The sizzling of meat on grills, the bubbling of stews in pots, the chopping of vegetables, and the clinking of coins and serving implements created a constant background symphony that Romans associated with prosperity, community, and good living. Music was often part of the street food experience. Vendors might hire musicians to attract customers, or customers might bring their own instruments to accompany their meals. The combination of good food, good company, and good music created memorable experiences that kept customers coming back and made street food an integral part of Roman cultural life. The weather had a significant impact on street food operations. Hot summer days increased demand for cool drinks and light foods, while cold winter weather made hot stews and mulled wines more popular. Vendors had to be flexible and adjust their offerings based on seasonal changes and daily weather conditions. Rainy days posed particular challenges for outdoor vendors. They needed portable shelters that could protect both their food and their customers, while still allowing for efficient service. Some of the more successful vendors invested in permanent or semi-permanent structures that provided weather protection, while maintaining the casual, accessible atmosphere that made street food appealing. The Roman festival calendar provided regular opportunities for vendors to increase their business and try new specialties. Religious holidays, military victories, imperial birthdays, and seasonal celebrations all created increased demand for food and drink. Vendors would often develop special recipes or presentation styles for specific festivals, creating anticipation and repeat business among their customers. International visitors to Rome were often amazed by the variety and quality of street food available throughout the city. Merchants from distant provinces, foreign diplomats, and curious travelers would sample Roman street food as a way of experiencing local culture. This international attention helped establish Rome's reputation as a sophisticated culinary destination and encouraged vendors to maintain high standards. The evolution of Roman street food over the centuries reflected broader changes in the empire's culture, economy, and political structure. Early Roman street food was relatively simple and local, but as the empire expanded and trade networks grew, the variety and sophistication of available foods increased dramatically. By the height of the empire, Roman street vendors were serving foods that incorporated ingredients and techniques from across the known world. A single meal might include grain from Egypt, spices from India, wine from Gaul, and preparation methods learned from Greek, Germanic, or Celtic traditions. This cosmopolitan approach to food was one of Rome's greatest cultural achievements. Rather than imposing a uniform Roman cuisine throughout the empire, they created a system that celebrated and incorporated the best foods and techniques from all the cultures they encountered. The decline of the Roman Empire had significant impacts on street food culture. As trade networks collapsed and urban populations decreased, the sophisticated supply chains that had made diverse street food possible became increasingly difficult to maintain. Vendors had to rely more heavily on local ingredients and simpler preparation methods. However, many of the techniques, recipes, and cultural practices developed during the height of Roman street food culture survived and evolved into the food traditions of medieval and modern Europe. The influence of Roman street food can be traced through centuries of culinary history to the present day. Modern food historians and archaeologists have learned a great deal about Roman street food through excavations of ancient sites, well preserved. Thermopolia have been found in Pompeii and other Roman cities, complete with cooking equipment, serving vessels, and even remains of ancient meals. These discoveries have provided invaluable insights into how ordinary Romans lived, worked, and ate. The Thermopolia of Pompeii are particularly fascinating because they were preserved exactly as they were when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. Archaeologists have found evidence of the last meals being prepared when the eruption began, providing a snapshot of Roman street food culture at a specific moment in time. Chemical analysis of residues found in ancient cooking vessels has revealed specific ingredients and preparation methods used by Roman street vendors. This scientific approach to food history has confirmed many assumptions about Roman cuisine, while also revealing surprising details about how foods were prepared and served. The social implications of Roman street food culture were profound and lasting. By creating a food system that served people of all social classes, Romans helped break down some of the rigid social barriers that characterized most ancient societies. Street food became a democratizing force that brought people together around shared experiences of good food and community. This democratic aspect of Roman food culture was revolutionary for its time and helped create the kind of social mobility and cultural mixing that made Roman civilization so dynamic and adaptable. People from different backgrounds could meet, interact, and share meals in ways that would have been impossible in more stratified societies. The economic impact of street food on Roman society was enormous. The food service industry employed hundreds of thousands of people throughout the empire, from farmers and producers to transporters, vendors, and support staff. This created a complex economic ecosystem that supported urban life and contributed to Rome's prosperity. The skills and knowledge developed in Roman street food culture didn't disappear when the empire fell. They were preserved and transmitted through families, guilds, and communities that continued to value good food and skilled preparation. Many modern European food traditions can trace their roots directly back to techniques and recipes developed by Roman street vendors. The global influence of Roman food culture continues today in ways that most people don't recognize. The concept of fast, convenient, flavorful food served in casual settings is fundamentally Roman in origin. Modern pizza, sandwiches, street tacos, food trucks, and countless other forms of quick service food all owe their existence to innovations pioneered by Roman street vendors. The Roman understanding that food should be accessible, affordable, and enjoyable for everyone remains one of their most important cultural contributions. This democratic approach to cuisine has influenced food cultures around the world and continues to shape how we think about the relationship between food, community, and social equality. As we conclude this journey through the streets of ancient Rome, it's worth reflecting on what we can learn from their approach to food and community. Romans understood that eating together creates social bonds, that good food is a right rather than a privilege, and that diversity in cuisine reflects and celebrates diversity in culture. These lessons are as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. In our modern world of fast food chains and globalized cuisine, we can still learn from the Roman example of how to create food systems that bring people together, celebrate cultural diversity, and make good food accessible to everyone. Next time you grab a quick bite from a food truck, order takeout from your favorite restaurant, or share a meal with friends at a casual eatery, remember that you're participating in a tradition that stretches back to the streets of ancient Rome. You're part of a continuous thread of human experience that connects us across centuries and cultures through the simple, powerful act of sharing food together. The legacy of Roman street food lives on in every bite we take, every meal we share, and every moment we spend gathered around food with the people we care about. It's a reminder that some of the most important aspects of human culture aren't found in grand monuments or formal institutions, but in the everyday experiences that bring us together and make us human. So the next time you're rushing through your day and you stop for a quick meal, take a moment to appreciate the incredible history behind that simple act. You're not just feeding your body, you're participating in one of humanity's oldest and most important cultural traditions. You're continuing a conversation that began in the streets of ancient Rome and continues wherever people gather to share food, stories, and the basic human pleasure of eating well together. And whether you're watching this from New York or Tokyo, London or Lagos, morning or evening, with coffee or tea in hand, you're now part of this incredible story that spans continents and centuries. The Romans may be gone, but their gift to us, the understanding that good food shared with others is one of life's greatest pleasures, lives on in every meal we share, every vendor we support, and every moment we spend appreciating the simple miracle of human beings coming together to eat, laugh, and enjoy each other's company. That's the true legacy of Roman junk food, not just the recipes or techniques, but the understanding that food is one of the most powerful forces for bringing people together, creating community, and celebrating the wonderful diversity of human culture. And that's a lesson that's just as delicious today as it was 2,000 years ago in the bustling, aromatic, unforgettable streets of ancient Rome.